Welcome to the Oncology Voice Network Podcast, connecting the voices that move oncology drug development forward.
Welcome to the Oncology Voice Network Podcast. I'm Dr. Kirk Shepard. This show brings the real-world voices of oncology drug development to life. Leaders, innovators, patients, and partners who are shaping the future of cancer care. Today, we're exploring one of the most defining forces in oncology innovation, the discipline of clinical development and the leaders who translate scientific possibility into real-world medicines. In a landscape where breakthroughs move quickly, expectations are high, the difference between a promising idea and a treatment that changes lives often comes down to the strategy, precision, and judgment behind its development. Our guest today is someone who has shaped that journey at the highest levels. Dr. Roy Baynes is the Chief Medical Officer of Therapeutics and one of the most influential clinical development leaders in the modern era. His work has guided programs across Amgen, Gilead, and Merck, including the development strategy for Keytruda, a therapy that has transformed cancer care worldwide. In today's conversation, we'll explore his career, his leadership philosophy, and his insights on what it truly takes to advance oncology medicines from concept to impact. Hello, Dr. Roy Baynes. Welcome to the OVN podcast. Roy, thank you for your time today, and thank you also for your insightful contribution you made as being author of the Voice of Clinical Development chapter in our newly released book, Voices of Oncology. Roy, you've had an outstanding career, part of which included being Chief Medical Officer and Head of Clinical Development at Merck, and you were one of the major leaders leading to the development of pembrolizumab or Keytruda, an immune checkpoint inhibitor that, as we all know, has become one of the all-time leaders for oncology patient access and use with an astounding wide range of indications for cancers. Tell us your story of how this happened.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Kirk. You know, I always wanted to be a physician and a scientist from my earliest recollections, and I was fortunate enough to, get a good education, go to a good medical school, and at the end of my internal medicine training, I was pretty much undifferentiated and could have really gone in any direction. Everything was interesting to me. An opportunity opened up as I was graduating to enter a residency in hematology and oncology, and I jumped in. This innate drive ultimately led me to a role in academic medicine, and then ultimately to industry. Always been a great privilege as a physician to provide treatment and solace for patients and for the families in that physician role. But as an industry physician scientist, I've been afforded the amazing ability to do this at scale. As with most, I have close family members who are long-term cancer survivors, and they inspire me every day to push ahead with enhanced vigor. I had a long tenure of approximately a quarter of a century in academic medicine, leading hematology, oncology, stem cell transplant, and cell therapy programs. My goals were always to innovate and advance novel therapies to address grievous disease. A number of my key projects interfaced with industry, and it became increasingly clear to me that industry was optimally configured to really advance therapeutic innovation. I ultimately joined Amgen in the early 2000s and worked very closely with Roger Perlmutter, who has for the last quarter of a century of my time been my mentor and inspiration. Now I'm currently doing my third tour of duty with him. It's been an incredible journey. We've introduced a large number of new molecular entities to the practice of medicine and count well over 100 indication approvals in the US alone. But you rightly state, for me, probably my most important work has been in relation to the development of Keytruda, or pembrolizumab, which really did change the world for the cancer patient in some small way.
Roy, tell me about that, because there were other similar drugs put into the market Yet Keytruda seemed to advance quickly through all these indications. I mean, it must have been a strategy from the very beginning, knowing you had a drug that would possibly have activity in all these different cancers, but you all successfully did that.
Interestingly, how this all came about when I joined, Roger had gone back to Merck as head of R&D, and I'll never forget the meeting at ASCO 2013. He sought me out and said, he has seen some of the data with this drug, which became pembrolizumab or Keytruda, and he thought they were truly remarkable. And when I saw them, I shared his enthusiasm. At the time, pembrolizumab was actually behind nivolumab, and we were very fortunate to have, tremendous depth in trial design. We built rapidly oncology capabilities. We built very rapidly operational capabilities, and we moved super fast. So the first indications came out of literally adaptive design of a phase 1 study. Actually, the joke always is it started out as a 30-patient dose-finding study and ended up a 1,200-patient phase 1 study, and it supported 3 approvals. And really, the architect of much of that design work was Eric Rubin, who really smart, mathematically minded physician scientist. The next, I think, big breakthrough came from the basket trials, and this was a program which looked at a series of baskets where essentially cancers which either had high mutation rates or expressed PD-L1 were studied. And amazingly, very rapidly, we explored 30 major cancer types. Out of those, 27 or 28 showed unambiguous activity with pembrolizumab. So the roadmap was clear. It told you where to go. And in addition, we had the ability to then explore lines of treatment, the salvage setting, rapidly move into third line, second line, first line, adjuvant, neoadjuvant, and then perioperative. Importantly, the CEO, Ken Frazier at Merck, Roger, head of R&D, and the board really got behind this. And, this was a very major investment because we were placing a very large number of bets. And given the remarkable characteristics of pembrolizumab, many of them panned out. So, as I say, this has changed the world for cancer patients in some small way.
Yeah, very large way. In fact, the theme of our book, Voices of Oncology, was about partnering. Tell us about that exciting period of when you're seeing this activity in a number of different types of tumors. What type of correspondence relationship did you have with the FDA and your regulatory colleagues about this?
I will say firstly that the Oncology Review Division at FDA has been really quite remarkable over the years in terms of professionalizing review and really systematizing development advice and putting a lot of rigor into endpoints and analysis such that the rules of the road are very clear. Because pembrolizumab had so much to offer and such big effect sizes, we were able to finesse a large number of accelerated approvals based on single-arm experiences, many of them coming out of the basket trials that I alluded to. And then we were able to, in the vast majority, confirm these with randomized controlled trials. There was one trial which we were not able to confirm, and we ended up withdrawing that indication. But for the most part, it was just a remarkable story of acceleration through, FDA-approved pathways, confirmation with rigorous clinical trials, and then advancing into earlier lines of treatment. I have forgotten the total tonnage at this point, but with the recent approval of ovarian cancer, I believe pembrolizumab today probably has something like 18 or 19 different cancer types approved, multiple lines of treatment. I think there's well north of 50 approvals at this point. So it's been a remarkable program. I'm not sure how often a program of this magnitude will be replicated. I suspect this will be a N of one.
And this, of course, required very early conversations with the FDA, right? In other words, not just going off by yourself and doing things and then asking for their forgiveness or approval later, but I'm sure you were always in direct communication with the FDA. Is that right?
For the accelerated development, which came out of the first in-human experiment, that actually occurred before I got to Merck. If you're correct, there was tremendous interaction with the FDA. There was actually agreement with the really remarkable number of adaptive design changes to the phase one. The team was very mindful of preventing type 1 error. In fact, Dr. Pazder at several meetings held up the Keynote 001 study as the poster child of how to do adaptive design, but then rapidly added that it's unlikely that they would ever allow anyone to do this again because it really created a tremendously dynamic and at times fraught pathway with just a lot going on all the time.
Well, in the book, Voices of Oncology, in your chapter, what's the most important thing you wanted readers to understand about oncology clinical development?
So I tried in the chapter to convey the key concepts related to drug development. And these include, in addition to what we've been talking about up until now, really the criticality of respecting unmet medical need, understanding the commercialization process, importantly, working on real drugs with large effect sizes, understanding regulatory precedent, respecting the fundamentals of trial design, embracing design validation, embracing in a major way quantitative sciences, by that I mean biostatistics, gaining appropriate inputs from experts, ensuring that the trials are executable, controlling your own data, and that's really important because data is our currency, sweating the details, ensuring trial integrity, and understanding that quality is not a negotiable. And then if you layer all of that on top of a couple of key concepts, you need inspirational leadership, you need to build the best teams, you need to chart a course, and by that I mean set clear, actionable strategy. And then you've got to execute, deliver results. And essentially, those were the major messages I tried to send through the chapter.
Are there functions most often misunderstood about clinical development by the other disciplines?
It's an interesting question. So, there are many operating models. The one that works for me and has for the leaders that I've worked with at the companies I've worked at is one where clinical development leads the cross-functional product development team, which defines commercialization, defines the strategy, and has unique accountability for generating the clinical evidence that supports regulatory approval and commercialization. I must say I've been uniquely blessed because in the good companies where I have had the good fortune to work, these principles are well understood, well embedded, and I have not really come across the notion of lack of understanding of the role of development.
And of course, these teams in other companies are led by commercial, sometimes medical affairs, project management, et cetera. But you're saying how important it is that clinical development is put there and accountable as the lead.
Yeah, I think that at least that's always been my model is that, physician scientists should lead the development programs. I think once you are approved and commercialized, you can make arguments for transitioning that leadership, but I've always felt very strongly really should be led by clinician scientists.
And where do you most often see misalignment among the disciplines, such as medical, R&D, regulatory access, commercial? Is there one area you think that they always seem to be misaligned?
It's interesting. I must say, in all therapeutic areas, the principles remain the same. You've got to begin with the end in mind. You've got to follow the science, follow regulatory precedent. You have to execute flawlessly. You need seamless cross-functional integration. And then we have to remember always that medicine is for patients. Good companies and good programs, after fulsome discussion and decisions having been made, misalignment simply cannot be tolerated. This requires clear-eyed leadership, deep functional expertise, cross-functional understanding and collaboration. Organizational clarity, and that's really important. Organizational clarity has to be articulated from the top and then adhered to, and understanding that drug development is a team sport, and the team is only as good as the sum of its parts and is only as weak as its weakest link. Drug development requires deep functional expertise. And by definition, that creates silos. The key is not to try and pull down the silos. Actually, as a development person, I love a silo. The key is how do you seamlessly and purposefully integrate those silos? In drug development, you have to sweat the details. You always have to work closely with cross-functional development teams to get all the details correct. Errors arise when any of the key concepts are ignored. A robust integrated project plan can mitigate such errors. Whenever there is misalignment, this poses liability to a program. The antidote to misalignment is clear-eyed inspirational leadership, deep functional expertise, cross-functional collaboration, and it always helps to work on great molecules. If you look at the architecture of great programs, it's always the same. They require great leadership. You require a great drug. You really need a great team. You need great strategy, great execution, and single-minded purpose to bring forward an important medicine for patients.
So when we talk about patient impact as far as our trials, how do early choices around endpoints, eligibility criteria, dosing, and trial design shape the eventual patient access and outcomes?
Yeah, those are important concepts. And I think that I am hopeful, firstly, in the current political and policy climate, that there will be some restoration of, a semblance of sensibility in relation to the access question. Key design elements always should respect unmet need, work on real drugs with unambiguously large effect sizes, understand regulatory precedent, understand the comparator landscape, respect the fundamentals of design, embrace design validation, embrace the quantitative sciences, gain appropriate inputs, and that's also from payers, ensure trials are executable, control the data, ensure trial integrity, and make sure that quality is addressed. Actually, if we focus on the key concepts for patients, we address all of the issues. Patients seek to live better and longer, and as long as we meaningfully address those parameters, the system will generally sort it out. Access is guaranteed when first-in-class drugs with unambiguously large effect sizes are brought forward. In jurisdictions where this breaks down, tough measures are likely going to be required, and that may include not launching in those territories. So it is the hope that we can get to a sensible position where indeed breakthrough drugs that have meaningful effect sizes that improve the lives of patients or extend the lives of patients would actually be accessible to patients. I don't think that's a negotiable.
So, Roy, there's a lot of pressure on these clinical trials. How do you personally navigate the tension between the urgency of getting the trial done, the uncertainty, and of course, then the responsibility for the safety of the patient?
Well, in general, these are all addressed by respecting the key underpinnings of building the best teams, charting a course, delivering results, and being a role model. In addition, I believe one should always strive to be an inspirational leader. Key is being a successful leader in development. Key to being a successful leader in development is to provide organizational clarity, consistency of message, and recognizing that ours is a noble calling. George Merck, an early Merck CEO, coined the phrase, "We try never to forget that medicine is for the people. It's not for the profits. The profits follow, and if we have remembered that, they have never failed to appear. The better we have remembered it, the larger they have been." And I use the word profit here, I'm sure George intended, as a proxy for clinical benefit to patients. So I think provided you keep the underpinnings front and center, you understand what we're trying to do, I think all of this really helps guide the execution, guide the responsibility, guide through any uncertainty, and amplifies urgency.
So you've mentioned a few very important leadership behaviors that strengthen the leadership team and development teams. Which ones have you either witnessed personally or heard about that quietly undermine them?
I think the bigger concept is let's make it rather a positive, and that is great programs require organizational clarity and consistency. And I think when those principles are not adhered to, then the process may not work. So I think you have to have really crisp organizational clarity: who's in charge, who does what, how's it integrated, what are the deliverables, and then there has to be consistency of message. You can't basically change the message depending upon the weather. It has to be consistent day after day. And then I think when you work on a great drug, in the context of having built a great team, articulated a great strategy, exhibited great execution with single-minded purpose to bring forward medicine that changes the lives or extends the lives of patients, then I think the undermining goes away. And so I think attention to the detail is really what allows you to be successful here.
What do you think are the major things that continue to slow down oncology development today?
It's an interesting question. I've thought about this quite a bit, and I think actually the industry generally is on a pretty solid footing. I think regulatory policy and process has made huge progress at FDA, particularly in oncology, under Dr. Pazder's tutelage. There is a little regulatory uncertainty currently, but I believe we will work through that. Technology, science, and biology have made huge progress. So I believe we are actually really pretty well positioned to make major progress addressing grievous disease. Market access in some jurisdictions is quite problematic, and arbitrary and capricious decisions will hinder patients receiving life-extending and improving therapies. As global pricing evolves, such access decisions may increasingly lead to unfortunate decisions, such as not launching in certain jurisdictions. Such considerations may also complicate partnering decisions, because clearly, under current policy, you really can't have prices being ridiculously low in certain reference countries. So such considerations, I think, are going to complicate, how we execute. Additional extraneous considerations pursuant to such commercialization aspects as the Inflation Reduction Act, access considerations, and reference pricing all have the potential to delay getting key therapeutics to the patients who need them. But from a science, technology, trial, execution, regulatory policy perspective, I think the industry is actually quite well positioned.
Regarding the future, what excites you the most about future oncology drug development?
Well, there are numerous unmet medical needs that require purposeful focus. We have the building blocks in great technology, science, discovery, diagnostics, clinical research, and commercialization to really have an outsized impact. And as someone who has believed in innovation for patient care, I don't think we've ever been better positioned. And so I must say I'm extremely optimistic and extremely excited about the future, particularly of oncology drug development.
Is there shared learning across companies and functions that could perhaps improve outcomes for patients?
I think there's always a balance. I think you're trying to balance essentially pre-competitive collaboration with anything which looks like anti-competitive practice. There are actually many, many examples where this is already systematized and working very well. When I look at, for example, the SciArms organization, or I look at FNIH, or the International Commission for Harmonization, these have had outsized impact in terms of addressing problems. A poster child for this has been a remarkable set of achievements from the pre-competitive collaborative effort known as Transcelerate. I had the great privilege of being on the board of Transcelerate when I was at Merck. And this collaboration has taken on and solved major operational challenges. Just to list a few, they include, for example, the development of a standard protocol template, standard reporting templates, standard approaches to protocol deviation management, the establishment of comparator networks, data harmonization principles, safety and pharmacovigilance standardization. And that's just naming a few. So, this is all done by the major pharma companies collaborating to solve really major problems. So I think the frameworks exist. They already are well deployed and have had really major impact on our industry. One can only hope that, such efforts might meaningfully reduce costly duplicative actions, because I think one of the challenges we face today is the moment any new target or new agent becomes available, there's this huge gold rush to try and get in on it. And, I think it's fair to ask the question, how many of any given agent do we really need? And so I do think that more structured approach to avoiding massive duplication is sensible. I think, duplication not only costs a lot of money, but it also ties up a huge amount of patient resources.
If every oncology listener today changed just one habit tomorrow to help accelerate progress, what would you choose that change to be?
Oh, I think it's not so much a change, but it's essentially reconsecrating ourselves to the concept that medicine is for patients. Medicines for grievous disease really must have large effect sizes in extending and improving patient lives. And this generally always leads you to the first-in-class principle rather than the best-in-class principle.
Well, thank you. Roy, I want to thank you for a wonderful conversation today about your fascinating career and the development of pembrolizumab. You should be very proud of the incredible impact that you, team, and your companies have made on the lives of so many cancer patients. That's it for this episode. I'm Dr. Kirk Shepard. Thanks for listening and for being a part of the conversation that's moving oncology forward.